everyone, and welcome to this Tantra Talks podcast. I'm James Gopala, and the purpose of the podcast really is to talk about Tantra, to develop a more deeper understanding of this word Tantra. There's so much misconception surrounding the word Tantra, and so it's my intention to bring in different practitioners of Tantra onto the show so we can discuss and learn a little bit more about Tantra. So I'm very honored and happy to welcome Mangala Holland to the show. How are you doing, Mangala?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
You're very, very welcome. It's great that we could connect. So let me introduce Mangala. So Mangala is a women's empowerment and sexuality coach and international facilitator of women's groups, retreats and workshops. She's on a mission to help women become empowered through loving themselves fiercely, celebrating their sexuality, and overcoming the fear, guilt, and shame that keeps them playing small. Having over a decade's experience in the industry, her superpower is helping women become deeply connected to their body, pleasure, and orgasmic potential, which is the natural birthright of every woman. She's trained over 25 intimate bodyworkers in Australia and places a strong emphasis on self-love, embodiment, and empowerment, teaching in a no bullshit, fluff-free, grounded, dogma-free style. Wow. It's pretty awesome. It's amazing the work that you're doing. Mangala and I met in 2012 in Rishikesh, where Mangala was teaching as part of a organization, a school called Agama is the name that the school in Thailand. In India, they were called Trika, and they're both terms that refer to Tantra, to Kashmir Shaivism, and to these deeper teachings of Tantra. So before we kind of get into Tantra and the work that you do, Mangala, how has 2020 been for you? The most mind-blowing year that we've had in decades.
Wow, what a year. My year literally started up in the air because I flew back from India on New Year's Eve to Australia. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. I had big plans to relocate from Australia back to the UK in March. And the week I was relocating was the week the world shut down. And just watching everything, just shut down, and countries shutting down, and airlines cancelling, and it was just like the world kind of imploded, and timelines collapsed, and I ended up getting turned away from the airport. To cut a very long story short, turned away from Melbourne Airport and did my whole lockdown, the first six or 7 months of lockdown in Australia, instead of starting my new life in the UK.
Oh, so they didn't let you into the UK, so you had to stay in Australia.
I had to stay in Australia, yeah. So I did.
And you're in Melbourne as well, which was like people call it Hellbourne because it was so intense. Like, what was it like over there? It sounded like it
was winter as well, and it was really extreme lockdown. So mask on your face as soon as you left the house. You weren't allowed to go more than 5 kilometers, and that was only if you had a specific reason. So it was really, really strict, like really strict. And then I managed to leave, and now we've just gone down into winter lockdown here. So I'm on lockdown 3.0, I think, and I feel like
Master
a bit
of lockdowns.
Yeah, I feel like a veteran, as somebody described it the other day. But actually, I've had a really profound, fruitful year when it comes to like my own inner growth, my own inner journey. When it comes to spiritual practice, I mean, there's just been like no better time to just really just like, there's no distractions. It's time to really go deep. And also I've run 2 successful online courses. I've worked with some amazing clients. I've launched an interview series recently. And I did manage to get back to the UK and start my new life. So it's been a tough year, but it's been really profound and beautiful as well. So it's just like full spectrum living this year. Yeah.
Awesome. So you really made the most of the time. It sounds like with some people, maybe they've retreated and taken some time off and some time out. Actually, you've really been productive, and you've done all these different projects, and you've really become, because you've had to establish yourself back in the UK. I mean, you've not lived here for how many years?
11 years.
11 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So an adjustment period, and wow. So there must have been quite in a sense, a shock to the system, but in the same time, it sounds like you've really been productive and really made the most of it.
Yeah, and I also recognize that my coping mechanism, to whatever extent it's healthy or unhealthy, is being in service to others. So I found that, you know, I have all these amazing skills and techniques that really supported people through lockdown in finding ways to stay fresh, to keep their energy moving, to keep their mood good, you know, to help their relationships flourish and whatever else. And so just to be able to share that with my community has been amazing. And luckily all my work's online and already was before this all kicked off this year. So in that respect, I've had some grace there that I didn't have to deal with that as well.
That's awesome. I mean, it's just from what I've, what we've been talking about and what I've seen from you this year, you've really flourished and you're really established and really on your mission and in your dharma and really embracing that. But I imagine it wasn't always like that, and that like all of us, you've been through your process, your journey of awakening, of discovery, of learning, of the dark night of the soul, and that kind of experience of the mind-blowing sort of spiritual realizations. So it'd be lovely just briefly to hear a little bit about your story and sort of some of the major landmarks, both internal experiential landmarks and also maybe the different chapters, in your life where you've been and schools and different things you've studied.
Yeah, so I mean, back in the day, I was working in corporate. I was in stockbrokers, and before that, I was in legal firms, and I was traveling all around England delivering software training to old farts in suits.
Can't imagine that somehow, Mangala. Well, actually, with your energy, I'm sure you're very good at it. But...
Oh, it's just something I did. And I was also DJing 4 nights a week. So I was playing in bars and clubs, and I was a real party animal back in the day. And I pushed it hard, like really hard. And so I was in this double life, and it just got to a point where, I did it for many, many, many years. And eventually my body just gave up, and I developed rheumatoid arthritis. I couldn't even get dressed. I was in a really bad way. And I also hit corporate burnout, and that was all around the same time. And it just got this message like so clearly. One night I was at a weekender, a soul weekender, and it was a Sunday night, and I'd not slept all weekend, and I was lying in bed sweating, and my heart was pounding, and I actually thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was dying, and it turned out to be a panic attack. And soothed myself down from this panic attack, which I'd never had one before. And in that moment, this voice popped into my head, clear as a bell. I'll never forget it. And this voice just said, stop all this nonsense and take up yoga. And that was it. That was it. It was just like this switch flipped. And I stopped drinking, stopped taking drugs. And a couple of days later, went to my first yoga class. And that was the start of a big journey, and less than 2 years later, I mean, that started the question of really looking at my life and like, well, what are my values? Why am I earning all this good money and then just blowing it every weekend? Like, once I stopped blowing it every weekend, it was like, well, surely there's going to be more to life than just traveling around the country delivering software training to old farts in suits. And so I thought, well, I'll just take a bit of time out and go travel. And I thought I'd take a year off, and I went to India, and that 1 year trip turned into 11 years overseas. And,
as it does.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So when you left to India, did you have a goal in mind, or was it like a one-way ticket kind of thing?
It was, I kept my job open. I had a foot in the door to come back to it. Well, I think they told me I could come back anytime if I wanted to. I'd put my stuff in storage that I was paying for every month. Everyone thought I'd be back in a year. And I just landed in Delhi without really a plan. But all I knew was I wanted to go deeper in my yoga practice and learn about meditation. And as I started traveling, within that first couple of months, I realized very, very quickly that just bouncing around, ticking off World Heritage sites and looking at pretty things wasn't what I was on that journey for. It was to study and go deep and to get to know myself better and to find teachers who could guide me into like the bigger meaning of life and all those big questions such as who am I and what am I here for, and all of that. So yeah. And about 3 months into the trip was when I went to Rishikesh and stumbled across this yoga school. I ended up being connected with them for 5 years, and that's where I ran into you in Rishikesh. Was at another was in that phase of the journey. Yeah.
Excellent. So that was when you were with the Trika school, the Agama school, and that, we met. You were actually a teacher on the course. I did the 150-hour introductory course, which is actually really in depth, and it was a wonderful introduction to the style of yoga that Trika Agama teach. And essentially it's hatha yoga, but very much taught in its original tantric context. So the characteristics of the yoga practice, you'd hold the positions for an extended period of time, and there was just a set position. We didn't cover a huge amount of positions, but we tend to hold the positions for longer and really understand on an energetic level what that asana was doing for the body, working with the chakras. I can't remember how long we used to hold for. It was like 4 or 5 minutes sometimes. And it just allowed you to really go deeply into the practice. And then we had the lectures, and it was going through the eightfold path of yoga, but the way it was taught, again, in this tantric context, I found it really beneficial to my overall understanding of yoga and tantra. And I actually did the first half, the first 2 weeks first, then I did a month of my Shivananda TTC, and then I came back and finished off the Trika training for the final 2 weeks. So I really, really benefited from that. And yeah, I remember having some really interesting conversations with you, and that certainly influenced the way I teach yoga now, and looking at it from a deeper perspective, understanding how you can connect to the energies of an asana, how you can connect into the chakras, how you connect into a state of meditation when you're practicing yoga. And so it was really awesome. So tell me a little bit more about, because I know Agama have had a little bit of a bad press in recent years. I know there was this issue with the Swami, and they were very much a tantric school. So let's take a step back. How do you understand Tantra? What is Tantra?
Yeah, I do want to talk about the problematic stuff that was part of that school. So if we take a step back and how do we define Tantra? So from my perspective, the way I see it is that if we look at classical Tantra, which is, when we talk about Kashmir Shaivism or other lineages that are very much rooted in that, then it's a very specific technology that's used to help, what's the word I want to say? It's very specific technology with the goal is liberation or awakening. And so that might be through, excuse me, working with specific fire ceremonies or mantras or different practices that are very, very precise to help you engage the subtle body. And the idea essentially is it's non-duality. So it's about you not being separate from divinity, or you not being separate from a deity. And in the lineage that I now practice, it's very much deity yoga, we could call it. So it's like this idea of merging with the deity. If I'm doing a puja to Ganesha, then I'm not separate from Ganesha. So essentially I'm worshipping myself at the same time as worshipping the deity. But the idea is in really is that we're not trying to go up and out and transcend. It's like everything is divine. So it's a sense of, I see it as immanence rather than transcendence. In the school, Agama and Trika, what they were teaching was a distortion. So it was some neo-tantra, which is the more sacred sexuality, massage and breath work and eye gazing and that kind of more modern stuff that's more sexuality and touchy-feely stuff that's kind of developed through Osho and others in the 60s and the 70s. They kind of blended the two together with this weird mishmash of neo and classical tantra, but a lot of it was very distorted. So although, like, you know, when I did that first month training with them back in 2009 in Rishikesh, like you, I was really blown away and like, oh my God, this is it. This is what I've been searching for. These people actually explain things in a way that I really understand. And it's kind of, and they're talking to it in a language that feels kind of like rebellious and like, you know,
Free love, and you know,
well, yeah, and you're different from your family, and you're not like all the rest of the sheep and everything else, you know. And this, and it was
special.
You're special.
Join our cult.
Well, but it was so subtle. It was really subtle. So it took me a long, long time. It took me many years to actually realize I was in a cult. But the way I do, you know, the tantric yoga in its essence is very much about working with energy and chakras and moving energy through the body, cleansing the nadis so there's more energy can flow, and essentially tapping into kundalini so that you can experience, you know, higher states of consciousness. But a full kundalini awakening would really also give you a permanent consciousness shift, which is something that I didn't really see with many of the practitioners there. You know, they'd have these high states and then they drop back out. And I found over a long period of time, there was a lot of focus on pumping the energy up, 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 up. So sublimation, moving it up to the higher chakras, which on one level is okay, but to the extent where I was practicing 4 hours a day for many years, it did massive harm to my nervous system. And it fried my circuits, because, you know, we're not supposed to be doing that. And there's lots of other ways. There's stuff in there. It was like, yeah, the idea of holding postures for longer and focusing on chakras is great. But what they were also doing was feeding in bits and pieces here and there of, now feel this, now feel that. And so there was like this subtle brainwashing that was fed in right from the very beginning, where you were taught what to feel and what to think in every posture, rather than actually finding it for yourself. And there's a very clear distinction there with, you know, there's plenty of other teachers out there that teach amazing tantric yoga and do it in a clean way. So
it's interesting. I
yeah.
think in the impression I got in Rishikesh, it seemed to be a bit more along the line of the classical tantra, and it seemed to be a little, you know, more pure. I don't think there was enough people there, enough teachers for it to be that kind of community. Whereas I understand in Thailand, of course, you had the Swami there. It was like a village, a community.
Yeah.
Everyone lived together. And that's where I remember a friend who was on Shivananda, and I was the training. And like I said, I was just in between the two halves of the introductory course of the Trika school. And he said he'd been over to Thailand, and he goes, it's the dark side of the force over there. You know, he's really serious about it. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, and some of the things I think we'd talked about as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to talk about some of the, again, I don't want to focus on this too much, but some of the dangers of the spiritual path when, you know, we find a guru, a charismatic guru who, you know, has gifts and has charisma and has certain energy, and the pitfalls, the potential pitfalls of giving your power away and becoming indoctrinated by a system. And you could also apply this to religion in general.
Totally.
And from what you've seen and experienced, so especially when it comes to tantra and when sexuality starts to be incorporated into it, so what have your lesson, what lessons have you learned from the experiences you've had about this whole process?
Oh, right. Well, red flags. Yeah, red flags. So yeah, charisma is a very dangerous thing. You know, and if, you know, I am now very, very wary of large spiritual groups that are headed by normally very charismatic, normally middle-aged or older, normally fat, old white dudes. With a big community of young, beautiful, fit, athletic devotees. Like, that to me is a red flag right there. Now I can see it very clearly. Another red flag is any teaching in any community where you're told you've got to have sex with the teacher in order to advance. whether it's to open yourself up, whether it's to heal a trauma, whether it's to experience some kind of spiritual awakening or for advancement. That is absolutely not true and doesn't need to happen. And you don't need to be initiated by a guru into anything sexually. That's just absolutely not true. And yeah, when I look around the community that we had in Thailand, and yeah, it was different in Thailand, partly because we're in a tropical environment where it's considered okay to wear skimpy clothes and next to nothing, which you couldn't really do in India. You know, and so the behavior had to be kind of toned down a bit in India. But when I look back at those communities, like they were really teaching this old-fashioned dogma of women surrendering to men, and men being this stereotype of Shiva and women being this stereotype of Shakti, and that you're fully in your feminine and the men are fully in the masculine. And it's like, well, no, as integrated human beings, we're actually 50-50. We've got both masculine and feminine. And if we're really doing the inner tantric work, then we're harnessing that polarity within ourselves, whether we're doing neo or classical. You know, it's a lovemaking between the two. So that to me is a big red flag. And I really believe that a lot of these communities, I see it in a lot of the sexuality circles, where they'll push you into being pushed over your edge. You know, go to your edge, be in a container for 5 days where the groupthink has swept you up in such a way that what you would never normally consider in normal life, suddenly you're rolling around the floor with a stranger and you've got no clothes on or whatever else, you know. And it's very easy to lose your center. It's very easy to lose your boundaries. And to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And that's a red flag as well.
It reminds me a little bit I saw the Osho documentary. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but it was really phenomenal. Can you remember the name of
Was it Wild Wild Country? Was it
Wild
that one?
Wild Country?
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend watching that. I mean, Osho is a very famous, arguably possibly enlightened master, but they built a community in America, having moved from India, and a lot of these things you're describing were happening in the Osho community, and the devotees were so devoted and so passionate and in their devotion to Osho, and it became violent, and there were deaths and murders and all sorts of craziness. And it's a fascinating documentary, but if you're interested in the potential pitfalls and dangers of a community like that, and definitely worth checking that out.
Yeah, and the thing is, I would say as well, it's people get attracted to this stuff often because they've got trauma, or because they're genuinely seeking. You know, like when I fell into this world, I wanted to learn about yoga, and when I got taught all these techniques, I was like, wow, I can actually feel something. I can feel energy for the first time. I can feel these goosebumps when I'm lying in final relaxation. I'm feeling all this stuff. You know, it's like, wow, then it must be true. And you know, and they were teaching enough of the theory. It was like I would say about 65% of it was spot on and was accurate. And because I was you're feeling this, and it's like, well, why would I question the other 35%?
Yeah, the question, take your clothes off and jump into bed with the guru.
And when you're there a long time, these things become normal, even if in the beginning you're like, oh, there's no way I would do that. I mean, yeah.
You must have learned a lot. How long were you with Agama Trika for?
I was with them for 5 years.
5 years.
And I was, I went deep. I was operations manager. I was an advanced student. I was an advanced teacher. I was in as deep as, I was teaching women's groups. I was in as deep as you can get. And it took me 2 years to get out.
Wow.
And when I got out, I was trying to blow the whistle. I was trying to, talk about the abuse that I went through there. And it didn't land for a lot of people. And I lost basically most of my community. And then a couple of years later, then other people started speaking out and everything became public. And that's a whole other thing in itself. But, the abuse got exposed because so many other people spoke up, and the Me Too movement had happened and everything else. But yeah.
That's great. I mean, it's a chapter in your life and something that I'm sure you've learned a lot from. And it's certainly, again, from studying with that month, as the philosophy was awesome. You know, and again, there are, like I said, 65%. There's a lot of truth, a lot of really good stuff there. And I'm sure you've taken the best parts. And, you know, now you recognize that you don't need a guru. You don't need necessarily to be part of that kind of community. That I guess we are our own gurus. And then, you know, you set up by yourself doing the women's work. Man, just give me 1 second. I see it's getting a little bit dark in here. The sunset is a lot earlier than it was a few months ago. So I'll just put the lights on. I'll just be 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, sunset's about like 4:05 at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, you just had your lunch and the sun setting.
Yeah.
So post Agama, leaving Thailand, what did you do then?
I moved to Melbourne and I went straight into private practice on my own, running workshops, retreats, women's groups, one-to-one clients, with a focus on sacred sexuality. And I really became really passionate about embodiment work and learning how to get really discerning on what was, you know, what's my truth. And it took me a while to strip out all the dogma from 5 years of pretty intense programming. I'm like, well, actually, what is true for me, and what do I believe is true? What's my body telling me? And that was an amazing journey, and I'm really grateful for having that chance to get that discernment. And that's really what the essence of the work that I do is helping women find their own truth. So that was, you know, that's been really awesome, and my work really started to flourish. And I was doing a lot of body work, internal massage, and then over the years that I've trained a lot of practitioners, but then I also, my own work transformed more into doing one-to-one coaching, which thankfully is online and I can work with clients anywhere, which is awesome. So yeah, it's been a real amazing journey. And one thing that really got clear for me, because for the first few years in Melbourne, I was teaching sacred sexuality, but I was also bringing in spiritual teaching as well, teaching about the tantric wisdom goddesses, the Mahavijjas. I ran an establishment called Sacred School of Shakti for a number of years, which was a mixture of sexuality practices for women and helping them on the spiritual path as well. And what really then got interesting was when I separated my spiritual practice from my work life. And that's both then really started to flourish once I stopped trying to teach spirituality. I just focused on that in my own personal life.
Interesting. And so you just focused on the women's work, and then you kept the meditation, your own spiritual practice separate. So that kind of helped you evolve to fuel and to support your practice.
Yeah, it was like I went through this. I've been in the last few years. I've been in a process of, I guess you could call it decolonization, of looking at cultural appropriation, looking at what's the stuff that I'm legitimately initiated in, because there was a lot of stuff in Agama I was told I was initiated, but like, what does that really mean when you're brainwashed? So really getting clear on that. And then having received initiation in genuine classical Tantra lineage in the Shakta tradition, and then we're like, well, who am I as a white chick to be teaching about Hindu goddesses? I'm like, you know, it just wasn't sitting right. So I was like, well, I'll just keep that for my own personal practice. And then business went through the roof. I found I was getting much more fruits in my spiritual practices. I don't know. It was just a very interesting thing that naturally occurred. Yeah.
Awesome. I guess you're listening to your heart and you're following your intuition, and it's led you to a place where you're more authentic in your truth, and you're doing what you love, and that's awesome. So when we talk about Tantra, it's funny, when I'm giving a seminar on Tantra, one of the first things I'll say is Tantra is not about just about sexuality or black magic? Because in the East, they tend to think Tantra equals black magic. And in the West, we just naturally, connect Tantra with sexuality.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize that in Tantra is a philosophy, a non-dualistic philosophy, like you're saying, and recognizing that everything is divine, everything is consciousness, including, us, our true nature. And so we are everything we see, everything we interact with is an expression of divinity, which is our true nature. And traditionally, there were kind of two approaches, if you like. The right-hand path, which is more ascetic, yoga, meditation, and you could quite easily be celibate and just focus on more of the traditional ascetic path of yoga. And then there's the left-hand path, which again traditionally was a little bit more edgy path, integrating tantric sex ritual, consummation of meat, alcohol, working on the funeral pyres. And it was recognized to be that slightly more edgy, dangerous path. It seems that in the West, we are a hedonistic society in many ways, and not that there's anything wrong with that. And definitely, Tantra is about working with desire and working with, our natural tendencies and desires and needs and wants, and sublimating into, what was the word you used? How would you, in terms of understanding Tantra in a modern context, how it can adapt to the Western lifestyle, what do you think the benefits of Tantra are because it seems that we're all really practicing Tantra now in the West. If you go to a yoga class, that is an expression of Tantra. You're working with energy, working with the body. What is it about Tantra which you think is so accessible for a Western audience?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I get really pissed off when I see all these things being advertised as Tantra, and it's like, it's not Tantra at all. It's Neo-Tantra, and that's fine. It's not saying one's better than the other, but just be clear on whether you're practicing and selling Neo-Tantra or classical Tantra. Are you running a massage workshop with and getting people to pair up and do intimate exercises, or are you running a very precise fire ceremony with all the bells and whistles? Just they're very different things. But having said that, even classical Tantra, both the right and left hand path in traditions were often practiced by householders. It's considered a householder practice. So that meant normal folks who've got families and jobs. Some of the greatest tantric practitioners are just normal people, because it's about it's like seeing the everyday sacred is one way of putting it. It's like that everything in life is worthy of worship, is sacred, is divine, and that we're not separate from that. And so I think where this then gets kind of distorted in the West is that people go, oh, well, I'm tantric, therefore I can do anything I want. I can eat the steak and I can drink the wine and I'm still tantric. And it's like, well, yes and no. And I really believe, like, strip all the dogma and the labels and everything else. It's just about being authentic, and just about, this comes down to me to like the exquisite pleasure of, for example, I've got this isn't whiskey I'm drinking here. This is pu'er tea, and this is one of my greatest pleasures. And when I drink it, I'm drinking it with full awareness, with full reverence for the process this tea has gone through to be produced and to be harvested, and this one is matured and smoked and all these processes, and then to be shipped to me, and for me to have the grace to find it and to be able to sit here in the UK and drink this amazing tea with these incredible properties, and to really savor it, and to open the senses and to connect to this wider expression. So I think if we all want to live a more full, rich, embodied, happy life, then we can take these elements of this, seeing everything as sacred and divine, and taking the time to be present, fully present with everything, whether that's with our partners. It's about doing everything with intentionality and awareness and full awareness. I had a moment on Sunday. I went for a long walk, and I was just, and it was really busy because we're in lockdown, and it was one of those rare sunny Sundays, and so the whole world was out for a walk who haven't probably been out all
Sunny
year.
day in November.
I know, it's
The
crazy.
UK.
And at one point I deliberately kind of opened myself out. I was feeling out. I was letting my energy field expand and breathing in the nature and just looking and appreciating everything around me and basically merging with my natural environment. And it was like the dial got turned up, colors got brighter, the birds got louder. It was just like this full blast of life force, and on a very basic human level. I think particularly like with the year we've had, everybody could do with a dose of that, of just like living in harmony with our environment, tuned in, present, aware, and whether you call that tantra or whether you just call it authentic living, that's what I'm all about. Yeah.
That was awesome. Everything you just said there was brilliant. Firstly, I like how you differentiate between classical tantra and neo-tantra, and I think that's important because there's so many people practicing tantra now, and maybe they've done a weekend course, or they've got no background in the philosophy of Shaivism or the non-duality, a deeper understanding of the subtle body or the chakras, and so that's great. And I think exactly how you're saying, well, if everything is divine, then surely the way we interact with everything, drinking the tea, doing just your own little ceremony in the morning, or washing your hands, or bathing, interacting with friends, everything is sacred. Yeah. I think it's bringing the sacred into everything. And that really, for me, is the essence of Tantra. And if you're in touch and aware with how you're feeling, you're not going to abuse that. Oh, I'm tantric, so I can eat meat or drink wine. Not that, I really do either. But I mean, obviously everything in moderation, but it's just treating everything with reverence, including yourself, and living authentically. And it always comes back to living authentically, being true to who you are in the moment, and following that path that is the most natural path of least resistance, that involves full 100% awareness, integration, really integrating your senses and connecting to that life force, of the moment. And I really enjoyed how you described that. Now, obviously, sexuality is part of Tantra, and arguably is an important part. It's an important part of life. And for me, everything is Tantra. And we were made, obviously, through sex. It's through everything. You have the polarity, male and female. It'll be your proton and electrons. You've got the sun and the moon. You have this amazing duality, night and day, life and birth, this duality, male and female. And then from that interaction between the male and female, then you get that third aspect, the Trinity, the divine child, or the individuated consciousness. And you could look at the Shiva and the Shakti, Shiva, spirit, Shakti, energy, matter, combining to create us individuated conscious beings who are male, female, God embodied. Obviously, working with polarity is a big part of Tantra, working with the divine masculine, divine feminine, working with that inner sexuality of unifying the two principles within us, spirit and energy, working interpersonally, also in sexuality. There's so many things we could talk about, but it seems that there's obviously in recent centuries, sex has become such a taboo subject, mainly, I think, through religion. We've learned to fear sex and sexuality. And, of course, we know through yoga and Tantra, all our power, Kundalini, is in the root and sacral chakra, and it's very much tied up to sexuality, and in a sense it's very similar to the sexual orgasm, though it's more of a spiritual expression. Why is sexuality so important?
Oh,
That's a bit of a
good
question.
question. Why is sexuality so important? Well, as you say, I really do feel a lot of it has, it's been this repression that's gone on for however many centuries. And as you say, that's come from religion and society and systems of oppression. So patriarchy. If we go much further back, the ancient religions and systems were more matriarchies, and they didn't have any wars, they didn't have any disagreements, and it wasn't that women ruled, it was like everybody was considered equal. And then somewhere along the lines, power and money and other things kind of got in the way of that. And we've definitely seen that even in India and Southeast Asia and stuff. And you just look at the repression that's happened there was imposed from colonial times, and had a massive impact. And the way I view it is sexual energy is just life force. It is the energy that permeates all of existence. So when you talk about spirit, you talk about energy, you talk about consciousness, this is a living life force that we see in every plant, every animal, every cell of our being. It's just energy. And the energy that flows through our chakras or through our nadis or wherever it's flowing is one and the same. It's life force, it's creativity, it's abundance, it's sexual energy. It's all one and the same. So when we try and, if it's suppressed, and this is a lot of the empowerment work I do with my female clients, if our sexual energy is suppressed, or we're not, for whatever reason, we're not allowing it to express, whether it's shame, conditioning, upbringing, whatever it is, if we're not experiencing full pleasure and orgasm, we can't ask for what we want, it gets squashed down. And when it's squashed down, it affects every area of our life. So it means that we're not confident at work, we can't ask for what we want, we don't often have healthy boundaries, all these kind of things. So it has an effect not just in the bedroom, but everywhere else. And the interesting thing, when I went to India last year and I received initiation into this Shakta tradition, which is a classical Tantra tradition called Sri Vidya, and I've been wanting to get this initiation for years and years, and it finally happened. You know what was interesting? It was like there were only 2 of us in the big classroom at the ashram who were Westerners. Everybody else was Indian. And it was like, wow, in all the years I've been in a spiritual environment, this is the first time that's happened. And that just showed me the difference with the charismatic guru and the red flags that we were talking about earlier. So, wow, this was so different. And this is the only time I've been anywhere in India where they are openly talking about periods, about the yoni of the goddess. We did rituals where somebody was anointing the outside of my labia, like through a gown, but even still, and this is India, and it's like, whoa, this is what I've been searching for in my life. This is, they get it. It's like, there's no separation. This is sacred. And when they were anointing my labia, they were anointing the labia of the goddess and working with mantras, and they were worshiping me as a living form of the goddess. And so that's, yeah, I probably went off track a little bit there, but that's what I believe. When we're harmonious about sexual energy and we don't have that repression, that's what's possible.
You become empowered.
Yeah.
You, and that energy that has been suppressed and repressed is available, throughout the day, throughout your life, not just, in the bedroom, there's a direct inference and effect on the rest of your life. It's freeing up that energy. And what do you find that, because I understand you work primarily with women, what do you find is the biggest issue, the biggest blockage, the biggest challenge women have to kind of reclaim their sexuality and to be, to take on this journey of becoming more empowered?
Often it's a disconnect from the body, and women will tell me all the time, I'm just in my head all the time. I'm just, and I come home from work and I'm in go mode all the time. How can I switch into being responsive and feeling like a woman again, and all this, and there's deeper layers under that, but it's a feeling of being disconnected from the body. And these women that I work with often do yoga and everything else, but it's a different It's the different things. When we're in a yoga class, we're being told to put our bodies in certain positions and hold them. And that's great, but it's also not getting into our deeper truth. So there's that. And what's often underneath that is just a feeling of not being good enough. It can be conditioning we've had from childhood about nice girls need to look a certain way, to be quiet, to behave in a certain way. I've worked with a lot of people who've had strong religious programming. It can be sexual trauma. It can be all kinds of things. It can be having had a shitty relationship experience when you're younger. All these kind of things can really impact. And sometimes it's just not having the education. Like, nobody teaches about female pleasure when we're at school. We get taught how not to get pregnant and how not to get an STI, but that's about it. Yeah, I know things are changing a bit, but
yeah, there seems to be a real lack. I mean, I don't know what schools are like now, but just generally a real lack of education, you know, for Brits or Westerners or globally as we're growing up. And again, there's so much shame around sexuality. I mean, if I look back to my sexual education when I was a kid, it involved, I think, miraculously finding some cartoon book, you know, appear like at the door one morning, and it was had all these weird trying to describe the birds and the bees from a, you know, child perspective. Yeah, I think my parents were too, you know, there was never an open conversation, you know, with my parents. And at school, again, I think we watched a video of a woman giving birth, and it was just like traumatic, you know, like 12 years old, 13 years old, and you get shown what a condom is, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And then also I was brought up Catholic as well, so you know, then there's all that like guilt and the fear, and it's such a shame. I think it's so important that we can have these conversations, that you're doing the work that you're doing, and that we can speak more openly about sexuality and even saying some of these words. And I love the name of your Mangala's just initiated a 1-month summit, a series of interviews over a month, and it's called the Vagina Pussy Vulva series. Is that correct?
That's right.
And I love that, because you're just saying, right, this is it. You know, and
yeah.
You know,
no, and that came out of me doing this inner work of looking at cultural appropriation, because I've used the word yoni for the last decade, if not longer.
It's a safe word, isn't it, yoni?
Yeah, and it's a safe word because it feels beautiful and feminine and empowering, because all the words we grew up with were pretty derogatory. So it was easy to adopt something from another culture, and then as a lot of the inner work I've been doing this year, it's like, well, hang on, that's not in my heritage. And even though I've been initiated into this lineage where they use the word yoni, and it's you know, that's fine, there's something that's just like, so I've been in my own process, and that's what the name came from, that vagina, pussy, vulva, lifting taboos of female sexuality, power and wisdom. So yeah, it's been a really powerful series. So
awesome. Let's talk about it in a second, but before that, so if a client comes to you and approaches you and wants to work with you and has this disconnect, and maybe have had some trauma, or, you know, has, for whatever reason, they want to do this work, what is the process, almost the step-by-step process? So what are some of the techniques that you're working with your clients, and how are you, because I think we all are, a lot of us are disconnected from the body, disconnected from pleasure, sexuality. What's your approach to help women reconnect with themselves?
So it's a really good point, because I'm a real fan of going slow and steady and gentle, rather than pushing people into a strong practice that they can't integrate. So I normally work with people in my one-to-one coaching. It's a minimum of 6 months, so that we can create lasting change and go slow and steady. And so one of the first things we do is really giving women tools to find easy, accessible ways to get into the body, so they can start to feel what's there and move through old stuff they might be holding on to. And we also, alongside that, will be doing processes of coaching and reflection stuff on, you know, well, what have I carried from my mother? Like, what is actually mine here, and what am I just replicating that I picked up from her and I'm unconsciously carrying forward? We do a lot of work in clearing a lot of the old negative programming, whether it's religion or society and family stuff, so that women can really tune into their own power and their own confidence. And a lot of it sometimes is learning how to say no and really tuning into what a full-bodied yes and a full-bodied no is. Because what I hear a lot of the times is, particularly women in relationship, been in relationship a long time, it might be that, you know, are you really having sex because you really want it, or do you feel obliged to? And are you doing it because you're worried your partner's going to leave you if you don't? And have you been overriding your own boundaries? And are you actually getting a full-bodied yes when it comes to intimacy, or are you going through the motions? And so by really getting clear on that, it can help steer women in the direction of like actually finding out what their full-bodied yes is and learning to tap into that more. And I also set my clients the best homework, because we do a lot of stuff
I
with
can imagine.
yeah it's like
that might entail.
yeah, and you know, it's just like, here's some advice and here's some things I recommend. Go away, practice them, report back, let me know how you get on. And that's when I love it, when I wake up in the morning and I get messages from clients all over the world saying, I've just had my first G-spot orgasm, or I've just, you know, had this amazing breakthrough with my partner. And it's just like, yeah, this is awesome.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So I guess a lot of it can be done individually, but also if they're in a partnership, then
Yeah.
they have some tools and knowledge to integrate that into, you know, their sexual life with their partner
Exactly.
and things like that.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of finding it for yourself first, and finding out what works for you, so that then you're confident enough to ask for it from your partner. Because you can't expect someone to meet your needs if you don't know what they are.
Absolutely. And I guess, what have some of the symptoms or the effects of this work have you seen in your students? I guess ultimately, if we look on, again, that deeper level, we're looking to embody, as women, you could argue, looking to fully embody the divine feminine and integrate all these different shadow aspects, as men, of course, are looking to do as well. And also there's the divine masculine journey. In terms of, how do you feel this work is helping women overall in their spiritual journey? What are some of the, you know, the effects of the work that you've witnessed and you've experienced over the years?
Oh, I've seen so many beautiful things. So I've seen women start new relationships. I've seen them leave relationships. I've got one client at the moment who, her and her partner, when she first started working with me, their sex life was a complete mess, and she felt really disconnected. And they spent all of lockdown in a really small apartment, both working from home together, side by side. They're actually now having the best sex they've ever had in their lives. She's discovered that she really likes initiating, and he loves the fact that she likes initiating. And they're actually now trying for a baby because they're in a really good position. So, you know, it affects everything. I've seen my female clients like start new businesses. I've seen them like smash the glass ceiling and, you know, really go to the next level in their careers. But on a deeper level, I get this. One thing I love is when they turn around, and I get this all the time, when they turn around and say, I just feel more like me. I feel whole. You know, I feel complete. I love every part of my body. I'm not holding any shame. I don't mind that I'm aging or whatever it is. It's I love every part of me, and to have that discernment and that deep self-trust in themselves, which I think is a really key part on the spiritual path, like, because it's coming from a really grounded, authentic place. It's like when you trust your judgment and you trust yourself and you trust your body's responses, it means you're likely to be steering yourself in the direction of knowing towards things that are beneficial for you. So you know, things that you would never thought possible before become possible. And that might be going traveling, or, you know, doing meditation retreats, or quitting your corporate career and becoming a meditation or yoga teacher, or whatever it is. You know, I've seen that time and time again. But it's really taking off the blinkers of what we think is possible for ourselves. Like, if you if we'd had this conversation, say 12, 14 years ago, when I look back to the old version of me, there's no way I would have thought I'd be putting out an interview series with international experts from all over the world and have the balls to do that, and that it would be related to sexuality. Just no way would I have thought that was possible.
It sounds phenomenal what you've organised, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about that series? Because I've seen, so you've basically contacted different experts in this field worldwide, and you've interviewed a different practitioner every day for a month, and you've called the series the Vagina Pussy Vulva series. So you're talking a lot about women's health and sexuality. Yeah, what inspired that, and what kind of what things have you been talking about?
So this is where doing all the work really kicks in, because when the downloads come out of nowhere, I trust them. And this download came when I
woke up one morning, thought, right, I'm going to speak to 30 different
I was
experts.
trying to get to sleep one night, and I was lying in bed, and I'd switched the light off, and I was just drifting off, and it just dropped in out of nowhere. And I had to turn the light on, grab my phone, just like make some notes, and I actually even wrote a list of the people I wanted to interview, and most of them actually said yes. I then sat on it for 6 months and did nothing, because I went into massive procrastination about who am I to be doing this, and I can't reach out to all these people that I absolutely idolize and I've got on pedestals and everything else. But I got over that and I did it. And so yeah, I've interviewed like some of the world leaders in things like sexual trauma, embodiment, pleasure, orgasms, menstruation, menopause, birth. I've interviewed someone from the trans community about their experience of being in a female body but not identifying as female. I've interviewed a number of women of color about their experience. And so really just talking about all the taboo things, because this is power. This is when we talk about Tantra and we talk about, we talk about things that are forbidden or considered transgressive, then sex and menstrual blood and all that kind of stuff is the reason it's considered transgressive is because it's powerful, and because it's hidden and tucked away inside, and there's all these layers to it, and so there's so many layers here of like, this is why we hold so much shame, because it's cultural in many ways. And so I really wanted to just like, all right, let's have the conversations and let's normalize this stuff. Let's empower people to choose wisely and to love themselves more deeply. So yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, like you said, 6 months. I know exactly what you mean. Where, you're like, oh God, having the courage and the confidence to do it. And well done to you. That's phenomenal what you managed to organize. And it's like kind of a bit of a synchronicity that I contacted you just recently. Just once you finished these interviews, and now you're the one who's being interviewed. So maybe that's the universe just giving you a little boon there. That sounds amazing, and I'm sure the work that you do is phenomenal. It sounds great, and I'm sure some of the listeners will be interested in working with you. And we will put all your details. It should be at the start and underneath the YouTube video. But if people want to get in contact with you, check out the series or work with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you, Mangala?
The best way is to go to my website, mangalaholland.com. And on there, if you're at the beginning of your journey and you want to get more into your body and you want to just feel more and start accessing more pleasure, I've got a free 3-part video series that you can sign up for on my website called From Shutdown to Sensual Satisfaction. And next year, very early next year, I'm launching a facilitator training, an online training that's going to be 9 months long. So it's really for people who've perhaps already been on the path a little bit, but they love the idea of kind of doing what I do, of being able to run workshops, retreats, online courses, one-to-one mentoring, and they're passionate about female sexuality, and they'd love to know more about their own journey and also train others how to become confident in their bodies and their orgasms. And that's coming soon. Yeah.
Awesome. And you're based in Bristol now.
Mm-hmm.
So do you do kind of retreats and in-person things? Or I guess you haven't had the chance yet, have you?
I haven't had the chance. Yeah,
Yeah.
I managed to sneak one retreat in February in Australia before I left, and I'm so glad we got that one in. Once things open up, hopefully I can start doing in-person stuff again. But I work with people all over the world. I've got clients in India, the States, Australia, UK, Europe, so America. Yeah, it's just great that I can support people wherever they are. So
Fantastic. Well, it's amazing work that you're doing, and it's great to reconnect in this conversation. It's been really enjoyable. So thank you so much, Mangala. And yeah, maybe we'll have a chat further down the line sometime.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. This has been a really fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Cheers, Mangala. Thank you.
Thank you.